Before I was even born, my mom had a roommate who she had been friends with for a long time. As I grew up, him and his wife became like another set of parents. Both of my parents worked a lot, so whenever it was needed, they would pick me up from school and take care of me until my mom or dad could come and get me. I even knew both of their families pretty well, and I was really close with everyone. A few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 now, my mother and him had a falling out which caused my mom to cut ties. He called CPS on her and claimed she was abusing my sister and I. He also claimed that I wasn't going to school and we lived in an unfit house. All of this wasn't true. A CPS agent even came to my school and pulled me out to talk to me. She was super rude. Even the office staff agreed. I didn't tell her anything besides the fact that this person who called in had started stalking me. That I biked to school every morning because my school wasn't that far from home. Unfortunately, the route I took went by his house. It was pretty unavoidable as well, unless I wanted to add an extra half hour to my route. I never had time for that. I was stuck on a route between a lake and a steep hill. My stalker knew this too. We had been close family friends, so he knew I took my bike to school, and he knew where I left it at school. He left a note on it once telling me how much he loved me and such. Around the time it had started raining a lot, so I had to start walking. This is when I started to get really uncomfortable. He would follow me and walk part of the way home with me. I felt like there was nothing I could do. I just went with it because I was scared. This only happened a few times. Him and my mom were texting and he was just being super weird and pushy with her. I don't know exactly what they were talking about, but I messaged him and basically called him out on his BS and creepy behavior. I told him I knew how he treated his wife. His wife has pretty severe depression and he gaslights her to no end. I lived in a pretty busy city, so parking was annoying too. He wouldn't let her sleep in bed. She parked in their driveway, even though she makes the majority of the income, and I told him how slimy it was that we considered him a friend, but he was so quick to call CPS on my mom just because he couldn't see us. After this, he stopped following me and started focusing on my mom. He would send her emails saying how he would get her fired and expose her for the child abuser she was. When my mom blocked one email, he made another and continued. He started parking in front of our house for weeks at a time. There was one time where I was walking home with some friends and I saw him bike by. His work isn't in the direction of my home at all. He has no reason to be around our house, especially parked in front of it. It was obvious he was trying to make us uncomfortable. It really got to my mom and my little sister especially. She was about 10 at the time. She didn't feel safe at all. My mom began to believe he was grooming us, and looking back, you are kind of seemed like it, but he never touched me. I'm sure of that, but there is always that what if that bothers me. Recently, he tried suing my parents for vehicle damage. So that took my family into court. He tried suing for money that we didn't have. I wouldn't say we were poor, but we don't have an extra $5,000 to give away. My mom wanted to countersue, but he never showed up to court hearings, and it seems like he's avoiding being served. It seems like him and his wife are no longer together either. I haven't heard much the past few months, but there always seems to be an email my mom gets from him. I forgot to add that we didn't get a restraining order because both of my parents feel uncomfortable with police, and my dad is an immigrant. A legal one, but he is still uneasy about that. On top of that, they were both always too busy to do anything. We finally tried to get this in order, but like I said, the stalker wouldn't even show up to court, so they wouldn't grant it anyways. He still parks in front of my parent house, and I always see his car when I visit. My stalker was my HS ex-boyfriend. We had a miserable relationship, but I figured I'd finally sleep with him on prom because after all his bull nonsense, I had a why not attitude. He ended up trying to intimately assault me and only let me out of the hotel room because I screamed loud enough that I could have drawn attention. I told him in no uncertain terms I never wanted to see him again. IT started that summer. First, he'd drive by our house. Then he showed up at my work, movie theater that was miles out of his way. Then he banged on my window at like 2 a.m. on in the same breath told me I was the biggest jerk on the planet, and he was so in love with me, he couldn't live without me. I threatened to tell my dad, and that freaked him out enough to leave. He was such a frequent visitor to my work that I actually had to quit because he stated to know my schedule better than I did. I had a FWB later that summer and into college, and my ex probably smashed all the windows out in his car. After that, he started driving past my house about every other night or so with his ridiculous subwoofers blasting. Finally, the neighbors were so pissed they called the cops and had him cited for violating our county noise ordinance. That cooled his jets for a while. Then I met my now husband, who is a big tall guy who is on our university wrestling team, and I think he intimated my ex enough that indirect contact essentially stopped. But that caused X to start telling our mutual friends that he used to turn me out to his boys and that he had hundreds of hours of me on video having intimacy with his friends that he was going to put on Explicit Hub. It annoyed, and I learned how seemingly good people who had been my friends would believe an absolutely insane rumor that came from the mouth of a truly bad person. That we only saw him once over the next year or so when he was stoned out of his mind and parked in our driveway at 2 a.m., again with his monster subwoofers, shaking our entire neighborhood. My husband went out to confront him and raced off, almost smashing into our neighbor's car on the way out of our neighborhood. IT finally culminated when my husband and I were out at a club, and one of X's friends came up to us and screamed in my husband's face, "I mess up your wife. How does that make you feel, idiot?" Husband followed him across the club, and X was holding court over his bottle service crystal and couldn't say no to my husband wanting to talk with him outside because he would have appeared to be such a chump in front of his friends. He and my husband had major words right on our city's main bar street. I was freaked out because 6 or 7 of my ex's friends had him surrounded. Husband was good friends with all the doormen up and down the street from wrestling and MMA, so I knew they had his back, and my ex was in for a world of hurt if he or his friends tried anything that I didn't hear what exactly was said, but that ended the stalking seemingly for good. To this day, I don't know how I feel about it because he seemingly stopped that day, but it's never felt like any sort of justice that it took my husband and the implication of violence to end my problems. I wish the world was an easier place to live in than that. I worked customer service at a retailer at the time, morning shift, so I'd see the night shift at the tail end of their shifts. I did a return for one of the night shift guys who was working a later shift. He ended up bemoaning that he had to get a gift for a relative and didn't know what to get them, and about having to walk to a mall somewhat across the street because he didn't have a car. It worked out that I was going to the mall that day, and I felt bad about him walking in the heat, so I offered to drive him over on my lunch break. Did so, let him pick a gift, then went back to work. He started showing up in customer service every morning after that, and it went downhill quickly. The first couple days, he sat on the bench for a couple of hours, stared fixedly at me the entirety of the time, and talked to me constantly. It didn't matter if I had a customer. He'd keep trying to talk to me and occasionally talked over my customers trying to do so, sometimes asking personal questions or demanding why I wasn't responding. Some of them got irked at me, like they thought I brought my boyfriend in to fraternize or something. I tried politely putting him off by explaining I needed to work, that this wasn't the place for that, etc. Then I tried being colder and more one response, avoiding eye contact and such. So he moved from constant talking to silently staring at me, watching every move I made. He tried to follow me out to break, but I'd lock myself in my car and he'd be deterred. Sometimes he'd leave for the day, sometimes he'd come back. It went on for about 2 weeks, and I expressed discomfort to several coworkers, 2 demi-supervisors, and eventually a manager. Creepy dude ate a whole sandwich, came in with the empty box, tossed it down at me with a nonsense-eating grin, and demanded I return it because it hurt his stomach. I tried to talk to my manager about it and my discomfort, and he laughed at me and told me to return it for him. This manager later had several employees report him for intimacial harassment, which was also treated as a joke. Right about this time, I went on a 2-week vacation. When I came back, one of my demi-supervisors came to me right away with concern. She explained he had worked most days I was gone, and every morning he came and sat in customer service and would ask people where I was, what my schedule was, etc. She and others told him I was gone 2 weeks, but he did it every day anyway, which finally freaked my demi out. She said sometimes he would also go to the time clock and ask others about me on the same day, if anyone knew where I was, etc. When I got back, he came by a couple of times and peered at me from the doorway, but ended up getting fired pretty quick after. I heard different reasons of why. Either way, it was a relief to me. One of my scarier one-offs. I had gone for a walk and was on my way back on. It was about 8 p.m. I was walking towards an intersection right near my house with traffic going the opposite direction of me on my right, separated by one of those plant/concrete medians. A van was speeding on that lane and suddenly slammed its brakes and reversed a little. There were no behind him. As this was happening, I heard shouting from the van and comprehensible words when they were beside me. The few men I could see were shouting things like, "Come here, hey, Semir. Baby, over here. Come over here, come talk to us. Baby, come on, come ride with us." I started walking faster and away from them, but also watched to see if one of them would get out, but they suddenly punched the gas, and I was worried they were going to turn around and enter the area I was walking in. I ran home. I worked retail for over a year. There was this one customer that kept coming in and spending hours in the store that always asked for me specifically to help him pick out things. Of course, being a retail worker desperate for sales, I was happy to help. He would end up spending hundreds of dollars. He lived about 30 minutes away. I found out when I was ordering his size and shoes for him and thought it was odd since we had a store maybe 5 to 10 minutes from where he lived. When I was helping him, he would always hint at how he had money, which led to him asking me on dates. I had a boyfriend at the time, so I would always decline. He started coming in more than 3 times a week. Each time he would tell me how attractive I was and suggest he take me out after work. I always declined, but he still kept coming back. It made me really nervous sometimes to leave at night because I was worried he would be waiting for me. Eventually, I started working at a restaurant part-time for more money, and one of my coworkers told him where, not realizing how creepy this dude was being. The creep talks to me about it the next time he comes in, and in an attempt to backtrack, I said there was one in the city he lived in, so he didn't have to drive so far. Later that week, I go into the restaurant, and one of my coworkers told me he was in and had asked for me. I explained what happened, and my coworker was starting to get really worried for me. Next week, I get into work at the restaurant, and maybe 5 minutes after he shows up. I feel my face turning white. He talks about how he thinks I'm attractive and asks when I'm off to take me on a date. I say I have a boyfriend, and then remind him of the store by him by saying that he didn't have to come all this way to see me. He gets angry and says he can't find anyone that offers my sort of customer service. The following week, my coworker said that he would come in and walk around to see if I was in, then just walk back out. This continued until I quit both jobs to accept a job that offered higher pay and more hours. Fool really drove 30 minutes to try to find me every week, and if I wasn't there, he would just leave. Creep me out for so mess-upping long, but I felt so much safer at the new job. I was glad I left. Still freaks me out though that one day he might show up at my new job.